You are warmly welcome to our first panel discussion, which will enter section 1, threats and risks. But before that, it's warm thanks to all the artists and activists who gave the video statements. They either have been active in working with Afghan artists at risk recently, and there were also several brave Afghan artists who gave their statements and who are still in Afghanistan. And I think we will talk about that topic later on. And also in these videos is basically artists who have been artists at risk residents, and some of them are still at risk in their home countries. They were reflecting on the questions we'll be talking about today because they know it best. Like what kind of structures and what kind of mechanisms are needed when you are at risk, when you had to get out fast. So I think that this gave food for thought to people already, and also some provocations. It's like from photographer and filmmaker Issa Tuma, there were also different kind of reflections on that how artists should be supported and where they should be supported, if they should be supported in their home countries, in the regions nearby, or if they kind of need to get to Europe. So these are all questions which kind of will raise later on.
Other wealthy countries. So the argument being that some say it would be brain drain and actually a kind of a bad move for us to extract artists and then not give them a bridge to come back and rebuild their homes and their careers in their regions of origin. So this will be one of the topics we may return to.
And this was the statement by Issa Tuma, a Syrian artist who actually has returned back to Syria after being in Europe for 3 years. Last statement was by member of Pussy Riot, Nika Nikulshina. We heard Masha Aliokina earlier today, a recorded statement, and also other Pussy Riot member. And Nika raised the issues that is what kind of support you need when you are relocated. And especially the need for kind of activist context and artistic context, because that's what you have, actually what you had to leave behind. But now we will very shortly introduce the panelists here who are with us. We'll give a very short round and then you can talk more about your backgrounds. So we have today with us Barnabas Benchik from Budapest. He is currently a curator, founding director of ASAX, Agency for Contemporary Art Exchange. It's an organization he created himself. And we first met with Barnabas when he was still the director of Ludwig Museum of Contemporary Art. And he unfortunately lost his job. His term it's renewed in 2013. When the right-wing tendencies were very clear in Hungary, and they are even more clear today. Welcome, Barnabas.
Thank you for the invitation.
And then we would like to turn to Andrej Kureczyk to a brief introduction. Andrej is currently a resident in Helsinki of Artists at Risk. He's a Belarusian playwright, screenwriter, and film editor and producer. Had his own production company in Minsk and also worked for years in Moscow before the Lukashenko regime made his existence in Minsk an impossibility following the uprisings of last year, in which he was an active participant. And he's also a member of the Belarusian, what you would call a government in exile, the Coordination Council of Belarus, and close to Tikhanovskaya, the would-be president, had the free elections been counted and gone ahead in the way a democracy should work. That's Andrej Kureczyk, who will be in Helsinki for a few more months. He's currently doing a first series on Belarusian prisons. He's doing, I believe, a TV series on that.
Then we have with us Ahmed Mourad Kanfir, who is in Tunis. He was actually supposed to be in Karlsruhe, but due to COVID and visa difficulties, unfortunately, he only got his visa today. And that's definitely one of the things we always talk about, is basically when we work with artists at risk are the visa obstacles. Ahmed Mourad Kanfir is an artist and cultural activist. And he is somebody who started to host Artists at Risk in Tunis several years ago. And we have cooperated, it's hosting 2 artists in Tunis, and one of them is Remi Sarmini. It remained in Tunis, and his story has been very fascinating.
Okay, to try to keep the introductions as short as possible, we want to hear your voices. I think it almost needs no introduction. I mean, he almost needs no. Mohsen Makhmalbaf is a world famous filmmaker from Iran who left Iran in the 2000s, I believe, and since has been extremely active, not only as a filmmaker and producer, but as somebody who's behind the scenes helping to evacuate those at risk, including hundreds of filmmakers from Afghanistan in the recent crisis. We'll hear more from him in a moment. And
it's we warmly welcome Sarah Wyatt, who is really has a long experience behind herself. She headed the Writers Association PEN for more than 20 years and has since then worked as a human rights expert for UNESCO, for the Council of Europe and Free News and many other organizations. So your expertise from that point of view is really welcome in this discussion. So it's kind of just to get the conversation, it's going about threats and risks. We would like to hear shortly from each one of you that is basically what are the most burning risks and threats faced by art, free creativity and thought right now, according to your experience. Is basically what you are experiencing right now. Either it's to your personal practice or as a human rights expert or from your context where you are in right now.
We could perhaps start with somebody who's currently at risk. It's just Andrei Kureczyk, since he has experienced it on his own skin in just recent months.
Thank you very much. For me, it's a great honor to be here with you, and thank you very much for raising such important topics. If we talk about Belarus and my own experience, I could say that we had a way from, let's say, light censorship to total pressure to the art. So we see several levels of how the risk getting higher and higher. Everything started with a kind of first censorships in theater and movies, when you cannot do really idea what you want and you don't have a support of idea, but maybe you can do something which government wants. And it was just a kind of first step. Then we found out ourselves in this situation when if they don't like your performance or your film, it could be forbidden for showing or presenting to the public. So you need to have a special document for this. And after that, we get a last level when the art become an enemy of the government of Mr. Lukashenko, because art brings those information to the society which controlled medias cannot do. And the freedom of artists become really dangerous for the regime. Unfortunately, last 2 years was a kind of shock for our art system. Most of the artistic associations were closed and repressed. For example, PEN Center in Minsk was closed, the Union of Writers, the Union of Journalists, a lot of cultural organizations, several theaters, a lot of movie companies, a lot of producers were put in prison. And then we had found out that a lot of actors and directors were put in prison, and writers, for example, just now, and that information I would like to deliver to the world. We have a 9th day of hunger strike of the writer, a member of PEN Center, Vladimir Matskevich, It's a fantastic philosopher. I think one of the intellectual leaders of Belarus, the leader of our, let's say, professors, academic world, and that's it. He has 9 days of hunger strike because he was put in jail half a year ago without any movement. After 10 days, he said that he will start the hunger strike without water. And all of us think that his life is in terrible danger. But he's not only the person who now in prisons. We have artist Ales Pushkin, who was put in prison because he wrote the portrait. He made a portrait of some Belarusian guy who was in partisans against communism regime in 50s, and he was put in prison for that. A lot of writers left country. A lot of movie makers and musicians left country. I was a member of Coordinating Council of Belarus together with Svetlana Alexievich, and the world could remember the photos when ambassadors from all European countries came to her apartment and stand like a wall trying to save her from arrest. After that pressure, she left Belarus as well. I was made to leave my country in 1 day. In the morning, I had a phone call from the attorney that in the evening I should be out, and it was full of adventures how it was. But what could I say? I have a communication with a lot of people in Belarus, art people. The first thing that they need is communications, because Lukashenko tries to make country closed. And I'm pretty sure all other dictators have the same ideas, to close communications between people from inside to abroad. The second, I think, because now we don't have our institutions like Penn Center, like unions, like artistic associations. Of course, it will be great if European countries could somehow substitute and help these exiled organizations or organizations which are not exist anymore. And the third, I think, it's publicity. When we have cases like Vladimir Matskevich, which needs emergency reaction, because every day for him in his age and with his health it could be final day. And he's a very strong man, and I admire it, but I'm pretty sure that he will not make his aims if it will be not publicity from international community. Of course, this information should be delivered as soon as possible. So that's what I see from my own experience. What could I do outside Belarus? I invited all repressed cinematographers to take part in the project, a movie about Akrestina. Akrestina is the jail which becomes the symbol like Gulag for Belarusians. And now we started to make it. I wanted to make it as TV series to give job to as many people as possible and to make them to live as long as possible from this. As well, we support theaters which were in exile, and I try to make together with John Friedman, fantastic translator, we make projects which promote topic of political prisoners in Belarus on different languages and different stages. And I think it's important to make readings and discussions on this topic. I think it will really help. That is my experience. Thank you very much for opportunity.
Thanks a lot, Andrei. And we will see part of your play, New Voices of Belarus, tonight in the evening. So we hope people will stay with us to see it. Let's move to Hungary. It's Barnabas Benci. Could you shortly describe how the situation looks Hungary at the moment? We'll hear about the censorship cases and so on, but it's how is the situation, and where is the space for free thought and art at the moment, if there is one?
Yes, it's very difficult to describe the situation in the short way, but I try to emphasize certain dimension of the situation right now in Hungary. So first of all, Hungary is part of the European Union. So from this perspective, we have to understand what's the situation now. And the other is it's a really long process. So it's 12 years already since the progress is slowly formed a new type of approach and policy in the culture field. So and it's much more sophisticated than it was in the totalitarian regimes decades ago, or as it's without any kind of physical threat, but it's an existential threat for the artists and creative people and free thinkers who are not agree with the present party. And my story started in the very beginning of this process. So I was at the position as a museum director in the very beginning. And when my term was expired, I was somehow administratively moved out from the position. And in that years, we didn't really understand what's the logic of the policy, what's the logic of the power. And since it became kind of clear, so it's a soft, but it's effective, and it's rescheduled the totality of the different field of culture, the different dimension of culture, and not to talk about the media, which is completely controlled. So you mentioned the censorship. The censorship is kind of structural censorship. So the different type of opinions are very controlled and put in a cage, put in a controlled and very narrow channels. So only the internet-based, only the online platforms are free, so to say. All the other media outlets and channels are completely controlled. And it's the same for the cultural institutions. All the publicly funded cultural institutions are controlled by administrative and financial means. And there are no any type of autonomy for the institutions and for the leaders. And the process went really step by step. First, the public museums, the collections were completely changed. All the public institutions, the leadership was completely changed to lawyer people. And then it turned to the educational system. It started with the Central European University in 2017. And then the academic field was completely changed. And the universities, right now, all these autonomous institutions are under control of curatoriums, kind of steering committees, and all the members are appointed personally by the Prime Minister. So it's a totally controlled system. It's invisible power games. It's based on the existential intimidation and all the financial, political, and ideological tools are serving the reason of the political regime to survive and to keep the stability. So we will have an election in the coming 2 months, and there are opinions even from the oppositions that the structure is so deeply changed that without constitutional 2/3 majority, it's impossible really change and reschedule for a more democratic way.
Thank you, Barnabas.
This is shortly the situation.
Yeah, it's a fairly shocking set of problems that you outlined there in Hungary, and of course, neighboring Poland is equally under threat, and the European Union has just now put certain sanctions on the Polish government for breaking rules, the rule of law, as they put it, under the new regime of providing COVID-19 emergency funds, punishing Poland in that way. But I would like to remain in Europe and address these questions to Sarah Wyatt. As Marita mentioned, she was previously director at PEN International. She worked there for 20 years and is now a member of the expert facility at UNESCO and the Council of Europe. Sarah, I would like to just remain for a moment in Europe, because as I said, I mean, we're talking about Eastern Europe here, Poland, Hungary, and that's the bad boys, so to speak, of the continent, at least in the European Union. But we also have countries such as Spain, where there are hundreds of political prisoners, actually, as far as I understand it. We know some of them personally, Pablo Hasél, there's Valtonyc, hip-hoppers who have merely, you know, in the case of Valtonyc, criticized the monarchy, and that's not allowed under Spanish law. How does Europe stand these days, and what tools do we have at our disposal to guarantee that we won't slide, as Hungary and Poland have, into more authoritarian forms?
Oh yes, well, first of all, thank you for letting me join you all here. I'm unlike my other panelists. I've not myself personally experienced attack or threat or censorship, but over the years I've worked for very many hundreds of people from across the world who have lived under such threat. And I've always been impressed by the strength, the calmness and the determination to continue, whether in their own countries or whether abroad. So it is great to be sitting at this meeting. And you're absolutely right. There is a tendency, particularly in Europe, is to see freedom of expression, human rights attacks as being somewhere else. And you quite rightly referred to the cases in Spain, where we've seen several rap musicians being sentenced and threatened with imprisonment, and indeed one of them had to go into exile, maybe more than that. But there's also, as referred to by Barnabas, this kind of creeping invisible control, certainly invisible to the public, in that more and more governments, particularly in those populist governments, such as you've mentioned already in Poland and Hungary, which are using the government, the mechanisms of government to infiltrate, shall we say, or to take control of public institutions. So in Poland, for instance, there is attempts to take over the museums and to dictate what kind of history these museums can portray Poland in. You've seen in Hungary, where you've seen the takeover of arts and academic institutions. And you've also seen it in countries like, even in my own, in Britain, you see attempts to influence who can sit on the board. So far, there's not been too successful, but it's something that, a pressure that is happening increasingly in Europe, as indeed elsewhere. So we also have to look at these small little things, as well as protect those artists who are suffering the kind of immediate threats as well, because it can creep up behind us. What's really been remarkable also, looking at Belarus, looking at Poland, at Hungary, and also in Iran, is the collective action, the strength of artists who've got together to oppose this, whether in their own countries or whether abroad. And that, I think, is essential. The artists in the countries, from the countries themselves, know the politics, they know the situation, they know the cultural landscape of their own countries and what is best needed by them. And for them to then be able to reach out, if it's appropriate, if they wish, to international organizations and organizations such as yourselves, the Artists at Risk or PEN International, and to work together to not just publicize the cases, but to push also for legal change which would mean that there would be no structures under which artists and writers and others who express themselves can be imprisoned. There's a whole wide range of means that art is suppressed, from the direct threats to kill through to the more subtle, like access to finance, like access to public spaces. We can talk about this later, but yes, you're absolutely right. We need to look at what's happening here in the EU. Actually, I'm not in the EU any longer. Sorry about that. And as well as as abroad, beyond that. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. It's Mohsen and Makmalbaf. We are really honored that you are here with us. You have been working tirelessly since the crisis in Afghanistan started. And could you tell us how the situation looks right now? As we mentioned earlier, that there are hundreds of artists who are still left behind in Afghanistan, or are in Iran, or are in Pakistan. It's basically, I mean, it's a vast topic to be discussed, but we would really appreciate your insight to that based on your work.
You're muted. Please. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Actually, I prefer to talk about Afghan situation for the artists at risk. Actually, 1 month before return of Taliban to power, we received a lot of message, email, or call from Afghan artists that they request help because they know that what would happen. Many of those who made film or they wrote book against terrorism, against Taliban idea, so they feel that they would die very soon. We 3 persons, Atiq Rahimi, Afghan filmmaker and writer, French-Afghan filmmaker and writer, Sadiq Barmak, Afghan French filmmaker, and me, we wrote an open letter to 300 film festivals in the world, and we asked them, if each one of you invite one of these artists, you can save a life. Unfortunately, the answer was not positive. They told we don't have festival nowadays, our embassies are not active nowadays. So we changed our mind and we went to Macron office, the president of France, and we gave his office the 800 number of artists and their family, consist of filmmaker, actor, actresses, painter, writer, poet, musician, dancer, and TV programmer. Fortunately, Macron accepted our list. And it was one, because of universal wave of attention. And the second, we find a man whose heart was beating for this issue. And it was the good chance for us. But it was late a little bit because it's taken 1 month to reach to that level. Then we were in the moment that an army airplane evacuating people from Kabul. It was crowd. We brought all 800 people in our list from different city to Kabul, but we were able to evacuate only 270 of them, not all of them. And then at the beginning of the September, all of them remain, except 30 more that we evacuated during 5 past months. Now, we can say we have almost 995 people that they are artists and their family waiting for help. A part of them ran away from Iran to Pakistan and Iran, and a part of them, majority of them are still in Afghanistan. Many of them changing their home week by week to be safe. and always we receive a very bad message. For example, 2 nights ago, one of them wrote me message that I want to kill myself and for my children because of this situation. I want to burn me and my children to get rid of this suffering that we are facing. So the situation is not good, as maybe you know. For example, today BBC Persian report that around 100 people were being killed secretly by Taliban. You know, in the media, there are not enough good, you know, the news. For example, I received a film which I was shocked. The Taliban cut the hand of a man and the legs of a man with 2 legs and 2 hands, and the man looked at himself and died. In this situation, how you can be safe? They cannot work, for example, because Taliban are against of any art, and they cannot move to everywhere. For example, last week we tried to evacuate one of the artists from Iran. Then in airport, the Iranian government arrested him and tried to reject him. Why? Because he has passport, he has French visa, but because like 1 million people ran away from Taliban to Iran, each day during 6 past months, 4,000 or 5,000 people without visa, so they wanted to reject them. The situation are not good. We need to do something for them before they lose their life or before they lose their complete hope.
Thank you, Mohsen Mahmabaf, for that statement on Afghanistan. Of course, we would like to also at some point hear about your experience previously in helping also Iranian filmmakers in the previous crisis in Iran, and perhaps we could learn from that and see how we as members of the international community and civil rights organizations and activists should behave in each context differently. Because as far as I remember, your approach is quite different from the one where you kind of make a big fuss in the media. You have been, as you described, going behind the scenes, talking directly to policymakers. But before we enter that discussion as a group, we would, of course, like to hear from our panelists from Tunisia and our dearest member of the AR community, Ahmed Morad Khanfir, who single-handedly created AR Tunis. Please, can you let us know, Ahmed, the current situation in Tunisia and how it reflects on you know, the hopes that the West had for Tunisia as being the kind of the sole country of the MENA region which survived the Arab Spring with the shred of democracy intact. What's happening right now?
Right now, the situation is moving, and we don't have a parliament, and our president have all the authority, but we have a lot of civil society that is looking for him very, very close. So for every movement, for everything that the president do, he's not completely free. There is a lot of NGO, and really the NGO is the most thing that we win for our revolution, because now is the thing that is very for every movement that the president do, all of the civil society is reacting, and this the situation right now. So
yeah, please continue. If you would like to also describe, you know, your experience of those artists at risk that have been in Tunis from other countries. We had an incredible story. I mean, you're on your, as we mentioned at the beginning, you were meant to be coming to Picasso today to join our network meeting, and you couldn't due to the visa problem, because I mean, now the excuse of course is Corona, but it's always been difficult to get a visa to Europe. even if you're the director of an NGO as you are, and if you've been to many festivals in Europe before as an artist, as an activist, as a film director and actor. How can you reflect on that with Remy Sarmini's case that came to Tunis?
To be a part of MENA region, we have always the problem of the visa. Me, I have 39 years old. I do a 38 visa, and always I'm scared to have it or not. So it's something that we can't handle it, and it will be always there. It's so difficult to take it off all the border. It's another topic, and
it's actually quite
talk it again.
Yes, it's actually quite shocking, given the fact that the European Union itself, as an organization, had Tunis join the Creative Europe funding mechanism. So actually, our ARNG project, which ZKM and CCCB are part of, was the first round of Creative Europe funding in which Tunisia could join, and we're happy that you could. And despite this, the visa issue remains an unbearable burden and hurdle. Marta, would you
now the NGO in Tunisia is like European Union. So with Europe Creative, all the NGO in Tunisia is considered like NGO in Europe. So it's the same in the same category, but people from Tunisia have the same problem as the visa. It's this something that very handicap us for our collaboration with other NGOs.
Okay, thank you, Ahmed. I see that it's, I think that Andre is translating to Ulazimir Ushako, who is also in Helsinki as an AI resident.
Yes, I try to keep him updated because it's very interesting, yeah.
Exactly. You have been advocating a lot. It's basically on behalf of political prisoners in Belarus. I believe that there are more than 1,000 people who are in prison right now, and there are also cases of people who have died of torture, such as Vitoli Asurak in May. Could you just shortly share your ideas of how the political prisoners in Belarus could be supported? What kind of mechanisms and pressure is needed? Because the situation, the sentences are from 14 to 18 years in kind of horrible conditions.
Yes, because now we have a kind of informational gap from Belarus because of some strong new world threats like possible Ukrainian war, or some Putin's deals and everything. So we see that focus of international community goes to that big topics. And in this situation, those who are really sufferers in Afghanistan, in other countries, and of course in Belarus, are in the shadow. And Lukashenko makes everything to make this shadow more dark. He closed Belarusian medias, which previously delivered this information to the world medias. He not allow international journalists to come to Minsk. The borders are quite closed now. And that is why we have a really lack of information about this situation. So I see several things here. First of all, we have repressed artists who managed to go out, like Vladimir and me, who cannot come back because of threat of arrest or investigations. And but we would like to support our colleagues who are in Belarus and we would like to talk about this more. So we are happy to use any opportunity for this, and thank you, Ivan and Marta, for this one as well. But I try to do art installations and want to deliver it to as many countries as possible, readings, discussions, and everything. If we talk about people inside, there are as well two situations. We have artists, fantastic artists, who are in the blacklists of government, so they are not allowed to work under their profession anymore. They're not allowed to make theater, not allowed to make exhibitions, not allowed to make concerts, not allowed to be shot in the movie. So they want them to lose the profession, and they suppress them with like making impossible to stay artists. They want them not to be artists, if we talk like very, very clearly. And another category of people is political prisoners. They are already in prisons. They sometimes in the terrible conditions. And the problem is that because now of these big negotiations between Putin, Lukashenko, and Kiev and Europe, nobody really pushes Lukashenko about their release, because they want him be not too aggressive, not to start the war or something. So what could we do? We could, of course, tell more about them. We could, I think, support, for example, artists, and this is fantastic idea, I should say, artists at risk in prison. It's a unique idea. So it means that people will feel themselves connected to the community of artists and feel support, even in the walls. That's great. And I think that we could invite as well artists who cannot work for such a conferences to tell something from inside Belarus. I think it's very important. Thank you.
Thank you so much for bringing that up, because the Artists at Risk Prisoner Residence, that nomination that we've invented for Masha Alyokhina is going to be continued in other circumstances, and we welcome nominations for future AR prisoner residents. And I think we should also just, there was a statement by Nika Nikulshina, who is a Pussy Riot member who fled Moscow and is currently in Tbilisi, whose statement ran just before our panel, mentioned that she feels that the need for an international kind of digital space for prisoners and artists at risk in general of any kind, to be able to meet and discuss and find a way to build solidarity. So that kind of alliance between artists, I think, is also really, really, emotionally and psychologically very important. And so we do have something internally at Artists at Risk, where in Telegram, all alumni and current residents can talk to each other and share their news and stories. But we would be open to initiatives, maybe with other organizations, to create a kind of platform where artists in different countries from all over the world could share their experiences. We would like to open the discussion, so please just jump in if you would like to say something.
I'd like to ask, it's Sarah to come. We are now in Germany, and there's a new government in Germany, and basically I think it's aim of many NGOs in Germany, including Artists at Risk, is to put pressure on German government to reopen the lists to receive Afghan artists at risk, and also it's to give them visas. And in the government program, they are also mentioning human rights-based visa. And that's, of course, something which also was discussed in former European Parliament and so on. And if we look at the case of Afghanistan, it's clear that artists, musicians, filmmakers, visual artists, political caricaturists, they are targeted as a social group. So basically, there should be basis for human rights-based visas, and it's kind of what is there to be done so that the Western countries would kind of recognize that need seriously. Do you have any kind of insight on that? why it's not happening?
I think what really needs to be done is to convince governments, to convince other human rights organizations, indeed, that artists are human rights defenders or artists are truly at risk. Sometimes I think we've all found that artists are considered to be sort of frivolous, people who do silly things just to entertain, and that the work that they do has very little impact. But from what we've seen in Afghanistan, what we've seen from all our speakers here, in fact, that's certainly not the case. So there needs to be a lot of education, not only of the government, but also of the public and the media, of the importance of artists beyond just people that keep us entertained. Now, in the COVID age, we've really seen the importance of art as a messenger, as an entertainer, as a support. And I think that's something that really needs to be done, is to convince those in power that artists are important. And interesting what you're saying about the freedom of movement. That's something that's covered in the UNESCO report. The conditions of visas, just generally pre-COVID, whether or not you're from whether you're not an artist at risk, is that the requirements for visas are so onerous, very expensive, very difficult to get hold of. So if you're an artist who comes from a country where there's a lot of persecution, that's an added problem as well, that there are restrictions against artists coming from Iran or from anywhere where there's any kind of crisis. So it's all compounded. There really needs to be two things. One is to make the visa system easier generally for artists, with recognition that this is it is a requirement for just being creative, for getting your for employment and for creative exchange, but also to recognize that the artists are very much under threat and therefore need to be considered more, to be understood when applying for visas. So yes, again, many other issues that affect artists, but on that one, yes.
Mohsen, you're muted again.
Sorry. I want to add something related to support of German government. 3 months ago at night around 8 p.m., a man who was responsible for evacuation of Afghan called me, we know each other, and he promised me that during next week, he would evacuate all the artists from Afghanistan to Pakistan and then give them German visa, then bring them to Germany. So we, 40 people, our team, we work to clear everything related to their biography, why they are at risk, their contact, their document, and then they took all the document and then disappeared. Then 2 weeks ago, after a lot of emailing them, texting them, finally they informed me, sorry Mohsen, because of changing government, your list is at the side, is not on the table. We should wait for reaction of new government. And from that moment, from 3 months ago till now, every day I am answering to artists that they find hope, perhaps Germany evacuate them. But now after 3 months, they will lose their hope. And there is no answer from German government why they put our list, at the side. Because the list that we gave them is the list of important artists, famous artists in different fields. This is not someone that has talent. They are real artists. They are real filmmakers. They are famous superstar actor and actresses of Afghanistan. They are famous writer or poet. So they are all at risk. And the reason, I don't know what was that. But from Germany, many artists told that we want to support you by publishing open letter. I told it is good, but it is good you sleep at night and say, okay, I have done something. But publishing open letter, it doesn't work. It's better we go to government directly and say, please do something. I can give you another example. 23 years ago, we had 747,000 Afghan children refugees that the schools door were closed for them. Exactly the same time as Taliban closed the door of a school for them. Why Iran closed the door of a school to children of Afghanistan? Because they told that if we open the door, because in Afghanistan the schools doors is closed, many parents come to Iran only for intention of education of their children. So we train 200 teachers and we work with more than 100 underground school, but during 2 years only we were able to educate 40,000 children. But when we have big universal wave of attention to Afghanistan in 2001, I went to the president of Iran, Mr. Khatami, who was more Democrat than the others, and I told, okay, this is the time, if you have heart that beating for these poor children, okay, open the door. He told, okay, I agree, but we don't have budget. I told, okay, you don't need budget, only you have classes in villages in the city. If you give them one chair in each class, you can solve the problem. And by his order, finally, we sent 500,000 Afghan children, refugee to the school after universal wave of attention after 2001. Now, we don't have that wave of attention, but we can talk with different governments, any of us, and say, okay, we have 1,000 artists and their family. Different European country can share, each one of them can accept 50 of them. Or we can talk with different mayor. If each mayor in European country accept one artist, is a small request, one artist, you can save all the life of Afghan artists. So if you put the name of 1,000 people, everyone says it's too much for us. But if you give them one name, perhaps that's work.
Reflections? Anybody on this way of thinking? Yes.
Yeah, so I'm thinking that arts and cultural organizations in countries that could receive artists at risk, are they able to maybe offer a placement or a course for one of these artists, and so that the pressure would be coming from the artists in the host countries? I believe that happens with artists at risk, who could then lobby and convince their government to accept these artists, which they themselves was then introduced to their own cultural community, to some support to continuing their art, and also to share their art and experience with the other artists and cultural organizations in their own countries. And it worked that way.
To say that it's basically, we sit ZKM in Karlsruhe, and the director, Dr. Peter Weibel, and the staff of ZKM was in touch with us right away in August and said that they are ready to receive 2 artists with their families. And also they got the Fine Art Academy next door to say that we are going to host a female student and her family, and they got on board a foundation in Frankfurt, Crespo Foundation, who said we will host 6 artists and their families and so on. And we got them to even to this famous German visa list, which closed at the end of August. It totally randomly, or not randomly, when the US troops left, as if kind of the need would disappear. And there's still no news of those visas. There's funding, there is hosting organization, same in Finland. It's basically where Artists at Risk is based. We have several cultural organizations: Finnish National Theatre, Swedish Theatre, Theatre Information Center, Finnish Visual Artists Union. We have funding for 2 artists, as Muslim proposed, and we have been putting pressure directly to Minister of Foreign Affairs. It's in person. and still nothing has happened. His answer was that it will be taken care of by UN and EU, and we all know that that's of course not happening. So, but I mean, it's kind of, we have to continue putting pressure, and I think nobody's giving up. I mean, we just have to continue this pressure. But in France, of course, there are good examples like in Marseille and many mayors and so on, actually that succeeded, but it's kind of, it takes lots of work not to give up. But it's kind of,
I could make some thoughts on that. I mean, I think, as we said before, it's really it's country by country, and even sometimes even at a smaller granular scale. I mean, that it can be a mayor that proposes, but in the end, it will be the national visa authorities that decide. And so that's where the problem lies. So for example, the entire Department of Music of Kabul University applied to us very early on. I think they've now been promised places in Germany. I don't know how many of them actually physically have actually reached Germany. It's unclear. But at the time, we had the Argentinian minister willing to accept them. In the end, it couldn't happen for political reasons because of his position. But again, also in Spain, we had the Catalan government very much in favor of providing visas, and then their foreign ministry, so to speak, that's what they called it, applied to, get Madrid to do the work, and they refused, or we heard nothing from it again. It is really case by case. And there is a need, I believe, in certain countries when there's no election looming for public pressure on the government.
And I think that this is kind of, this direct political pressure has to go on. We just talked with Norwegian, kind of its public radio, and asked them that has Norway received any artists at risk, and they said from Afghanistan, they said no. So there are kind of lots of Nordic countries also, which certainly, it's not lack of resources. People are needed there, and they're educated people in Afghanistan, but it's, the doors are closed, and it's not acceptable, of course.
No. I mean, it's kind of, I mean, I think this is something that would make sense. I mean, there is this kind of weird conception in the world, especially outside of Europe, but even in most of Southern Europe, that the Scandinavian and Nordic region is some kind of paradise in which human rights just given to you at birth, and everyone is treated equally. Everything's wonderful. Finland has received almost zero. As far as we know, Norway, none. Denmark is run by a very anti-immigrant, practically far-right government, even though it's a socialist government in name. In terms of immigration, it's very, very reactionary. So we have to also somehow, do you think that something like naming and shaming works? Is that a question we could perhaps address? How about Barnabas? Would you have a response to that? I mean, that Hungary is in the hot seat in Europe all the time. Has that had any positive result? You're muted.
The zero migration, this is official policy right now in Hungary. So no solidarity, no any support for people suffering anywhere, any kind of situation, zero migration. This is kind of the main direction of the government policy. So since the migration crisis back to 2015, when this huge flow went through Hungary, it was really used as a kind of manipulation tool to stabilize the power position of the government, to use the rhetoric against the migration and against the migrants. And this became the most solid point of the policy, which has a huge support in the society. And through the propaganda since it's all more than 6 years, the propaganda, the brainwashing completely changed the mentality of the Hungarian people, and they are really a majority against migration, against any kind of foreign people settle and working in Hungary. So it's really artificially created xenophobia among people.
Thank you so much for raising that point, because this is really what this entire section is about. Because what we're trying to understand as we're trying to put the threats and risks on the table. And now we see how in Hungary and other countries of Europe, this issue has basically strengthened the far right. And there can be, I mean, in some countries it's been avoided, like in Germany, the AfD, but if the number of people coming in gets higher, it can be again exploited. So we have to be aware that this is only going to get worse, right? With extreme climate events, drought, and so on, there's going to be not only hundreds of thousands, but millions, but then even tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions, that are going to be on the move throughout the world in this century. So we have to be, in some ways, this is what we're talking about. How can we kind of prepare the ground so that people don't react in a reactionary, closing all borders, building walls, and holding tight in their fortresses, and keeping everyone out? That's the worst possible outcome. How can, that's what we're thinking of. Can we be in alliance with countries outside of the European Union and institutions, or how can we work? Andre might have ideas about this, or
yeah, I think it's a very big possibility actually for many artists. I mean, there are several countries which are on the way they're not, let's say, part of European Union. They're on the way, but they're quite safe and very interesting actually for culture, like Georgia, Armenia, Ukraine, and maybe some for some nationalities as Azerbaijan as well, for Turks, and they're very nice. They're full of actually cultural events and opportunities, very active, supportive people. For example, we have a lot of Belarusians who moved to Ukraine. And Vladimir, he established his theater, which was closed in Minsk, now in Kiev, and he made already 2 performances. And Ukrainian actors are very supportive. They help, and theater said, please, you can have rehearsals free of charge here, and we will make a discount on lease, on everything, because we would like to support. And I feel this support in Kiev, in Odessa, in Kherson. So I'm pretty sure that it's opportunity. I don't know many countries, but I think 5 or 10 countries could be option for time, let's say, staying, and maybe then the bureaucratic problems will be solved. People could move further. And I think there are some artists who are really like to travel, to move. They don't want to sit in one country. Some of them want to be in one place and go to another and explore and find where the better for them. Like me, for example, I'd love to. I'd like to go to, I don't know, South America or to some Asian countries. And for me, it's so interesting to explore everything. So I think it's a very big opportunity, and it's much cheaper because, for example, cost of living in Georgia or Ukraine maybe 2 or 3 times cheaper than in Finland, but with the same opportunities and same level. So you could have for this money more artists who have their good flats and good food and education for children, but much money for the same money.
We are actually currently hosting for Pussy Riot members in Tbilisi, and Georgia is actually very open with the visa policies compared to Schengen area for sure. It's also fast to relocate people there from many countries. I like to kind of ask from Barnabas, because we were talking about this is kind of the threat of right wing, and it's basically you have your own space there, and basically you are doing cultural exchange and so on, and there's off biennial, there's gallery ferry and so on. That basically, what are the ways, because that's exactly what you need in countries like Hungary, where right-winging is so strong, that what kind of is support and alliances you need to keep kind of these spaces going? That is basically, do you have any message is kind of how it can be supported.
You know, we need the same type of support, like those people who are suffering, who are really in a difficult and tragic situation. We are still not in that level, but we need the communication. We need to keep in contact with them. We need to keep the openness. We have to keep on the communication, and it's really important to feel that there is solidarity around, and that's really difficult sometimes to find the right format how to express our solidarity, especially from our case when the state is completely against any kind of humanitarian kind of support. As an individual people, you can't make anything. So it's in this sense it's hard. But through the level of communication to express the solidarity. And I think it's really nice idea to provide a kind of online platform for this kind of expression, to meet the people, to provide a forum for the people in the virtual space, even to create a virtual exhibition space if we are talking about creative artists. We are talking a lot about metaverse, but I think the virtual reality is already there. So we can really provide. Actually, we are talking connected to ZKM, which is in the kind of flagship of the media art. So I think in this sense there are lots of opportunity, because the telecommunication connection is still on. I don't know how is the situation with Afghanistan, but still Russia is connected. So it's really an option to create safe spaces in the virtual space, in the metaverse, something. And you know, I just have a friend who is really improving virtual exhibition spaces. Right. So it's a perfect platform really to share the creativity, to celebrate the creative energy in the virtual space through this tools. So you have the network, there is the media. So I think it could be an option.
Thank you for that, and please, if you have you know the energy tonight, join us. Gather Town. We actually have a virtual meeting space, which all of you, we hope, will be present in. It's already active. There are I saw Issa Turma, the photographer from Syria, is currently in that space. You can go talk to him in person. A little video screen pops up when you walk around with your little munchkin. And you can meet one of the, he won the London Film Festival Short Film Award, the European Film Festival Short Film Award, a great artist. He's there. Please go talk to him in person in Gathertown. The link is on ZKM's page and also on our page website, so artistatrisk.org or zkm.de, and just click on that and find Gathertown. I would like to pick up on what you just said, though, Barnabas, also, and a comment that we just received via the YouTube. It says the symposium should be continued in more countries in the EU to collect ideas of support and to continue to inform, and it should return to ZKM to reflect again and share the ideas of support. So thank you for that, Bernadette. We hear you. And I think we would like to then also go beyond the EU again to Tunis, because I mean, do you want to ask a question? I have a question too, but go ahead.
But we both have questions, so it's Ahmed. We have many questions. I like to ask you, Ahmed, because you're also kind of on that side, that you have been hosting Artists at Risk residents, and you could actually host more residents there, but it's an issue of resources. So could you reflect that? It is basically that what kind of support you would need. It's, as Andre also said, that it's kind of, there are many other cities like Tunis or Tbilisi, and we have had the same problem. It's within our funding that it's not so easy to find funding to support residency hosts outside of Europe. It's easier to find funding tools to support kind of its residencies within EU, even though it's much more expensive. And we really want to strengthen our partners like in Tunis and Tbilisi and Sofia and so on. So could you talk about that, and it's what is needed there in Tunisia and in MENA region generally?
One of the most problem in Tunisia is the finance, because the government don't finance this kind of project. And sometimes it's so difficult to bring the money from other country, because we are not open for any other country to receive money for that. And this is a kind of censorship, if a new way of censorship. And after that, sometimes we find another problem that I think that we don't talk about. After 20 years of dictatorship, the society is, he creates some topic that the society don't accept artists to talk about. So sometimes we find a problem not only in the government, in the society himself. Society has scared topic that some artists become at risk and automatically go for auto-censorship. And he's scared to talk about this topic. And he finds himself in auto-censorship, and the day that he go out from the country and he find himself in another country, then he find his freedom of expression, and he start to do it his real work, artist work. So this topic that I need to mention it. Yes, Andre.
Yes, and may I add, we as well should a little bit divide, because that's what I don't see, but maybe it will be more effective, and then the help will be more effective. There are some artists who are really not about money, they about security. They could be established, they could have some money, or they could find work very easily. And it's not about their financing, it's about getting them out from danger. And sometimes the visa and ticket, it will be quite enough for them, because they know their plan, how could they survive with their friends or diaspora or some other organizations. Some of them, yes, of course, they need money, and money is focus for them because they don't have. But if we as well could really understand what artists need, and maybe he says, I don't want wait long time when you find money, but because I need to get out now. And for me, this visa help and maybe tickets will be enough, and I will find everything else by myself. And I cannot wait for a year or half a year when maybe it should be like divided attitude for this kind of, and then you can rescue 2 artists for the same money, or 3 artists, and they will be happy. Or you need to wait and take 1 artist, pay him residency, living and everything, but maybe he doesn't sometimes need it in that moment, or he cannot wait for that moment. So maybe we could see as well different situations here. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Andre. So you want to answer directly? Yes, go ahead, please, Ahmed.
So for the case of Tunisia, we are a welcome country. So a lot of people don't need a visa to come in Tunisia. But after that, there is the NGO, and that he needs a finance to host the artist, to prepare all the thing for the artist. He's a risk when he arrives to this place that he's safe. He needs an assistance, psychology assistance. We have this kind of experience with artists that we host, and we understand the importance of the psychologist assistant, and for that we need the money. The problem that we have in Tunisia, that when we host artists, we host only for 3 months, and we can do it like 6 months. After that, he can't stay here. So he need to move. And if we do it like special map of the earth of all the NGO that we work together, then we do it like a train between countries, and the artist, he will travel from one to another one.
That's what we do.
We need to, because there is no way to find him a place that he will stay forever, and he's
this is fantastic because we're speaking to not only an actor and an organizer and director of Art Veda, but also a son of a train driver and also a train driver himself. A great movie that you put on at, it was the Rotterdam Film Festival, I believe. Was it in? Yes. So that's how we got to know you, in fact. But I would like to kind of, I mean, I think you raised a very important point, both Andre and you, when we're talking about staying in the regions, or at least not having to come to Europe or other wealthy countries, because I mean, you know, the question of migration I addressed earlier, where due to climate catastrophe, we're going to be facing not only, you know, like we're going to be facing millions of people on the move. And so we already have that, and it's going to only increase. So the question is now, I mean, when you think about it in the big picture, you will say, okay, well, what is the job of like major politics? What should they be doing? Well, I mean, in the end, just helping, you know, another 10,000 here, 100,000 there is not actually the solution. It's just, you know, the Band-Aid on the problem. The problem lies in the countries that are falling apart, right? In Africa, in the Middle East. These are states which for one reason or another have lost the ability to feed and to care for their populations. And why is that? And it's due to a certain, you know, post-colonial structure that still maintains a very extreme inequality between countries and continents. And I think if we are to be honest about this, we must kind of understand, especially in the art world, that we can do things to perhaps strengthen our institutions in those countries so that they can, as partners, as peers, not as people to be helped, but as other curators, other artists, other filmmakers, that we want them to succeed, not by coming here, but by coming to a safe place in their region and rebuilding their countries. And this is part of what we're trying to think about. How can we do that? Let's say, if we could, what would it mean to really strengthen the film industry in Nigeria, say? Mohsen, you know, do you think something like that would be possible? In Egypt, the great history of the Egyptian film industry, but people are fleeing like mad. So how can we act as cultural, you know, players?
I think this is the final comment and question. I think we had to wrap up.
Yeah, it's a big question, but we're going to be addressing this tomorrow, of course.
But if you have fast responses to that.
Yeah, actually, in my homeland, Iran, always we have around 3 million Afghan refugees that always they run away because of unsecure situation that they face in their country. For example, when I was making my movie Kandahar in 2000 at the side of the border of Afghanistan, every night we have seen a lot of people are running, the family running, they were sick, only they were searching for food or to be alive. So always there are big movement of refugees from Afghanistan to my homeland. And always Iran try to reject them, but they are not able to do completely. They reject a part, then you see the day after many people arrive again. Why? Because of unsecure situation. So as much as the world is not injustice, we would see this kind of movement. People try to be safe, people try to be alive, people try to have food to feed their children. For example, many artists really, they were crying and then they say, we don't have food to feed our children. It's not only matter of art activity, it's matter of being alive in this situation. Now in Afghanistan, the economy is somehow zero. The government has no money, the people has no money, and there is no job. Before that, they were farmering, they were, you know, they had sheep in the mountain. When Soviet attacked to Afghanistan, they lost their job and they become partisan and they destroyed country. So nowadays there is no economy in Afghanistan. That's why we would see more and more refugees to Iran, to Turkey, to Europe, because of politicians, because of lack of money, and because of lack of freedom, and generally because of lack of justice in this world.
So that's a very depressing way of summing up the current situation for Afghanistan, obviously. But we hope that we have some more optimistic views too on this kind of solidarity that you're explaining actually exists, right? So if you see it the other way around, you can see it, how wonderful it is that there are Iranians willing to receive them and help them and do it, even though the government is not doing its part. And I think this is what we see here. We're all in this not because of a job. We're here because of, you know, our own experience and wish to try to change things. So if you would, any closing comments, we would be happy to hear them. Otherwise, we would like to just make sure that you know we've been discussing and can't stop already a half an hour over time. So I think it's a very, very important topic, and we feel strongly about it. And we can continue tomorrow. We're starting at 4 p.m. Central European time.
I would like to suggest one comment. If each one of us turn on a candle, we don't need to the sun. If each one of us try to save life of a person, artist at risk, from anywhere, is much better than do a lot of, you know, conversation and a lot of open letter signature. Because in my experience, this kind of activity is beautiful, but really doesn't work. We need to be active in reality. For example, I invited in one film festival, they were insisting I don't mention the name, in France. I told, if you need me to be there, please invite 2 Afghan artists as well, and they accept that. We need to do something in reality. So turn on a candle around yourself is much better than doing huge conversation in the world, which is full of noise nowadays.
That's really good. It's a beautiful closing comment, Mohsen, and that's the introduction for tomorrow's topic, institutions as resistance. We have institutional leaders from IFA and so on, and ZKM, for example, is an institution. Dr. Peter Weibel has been in touch with the ministries and is still appealing to get those visas and receive artists. That's what we are talking about. And as we talked in the beginning, the aim is that we'll have a kind of working meeting in Berlin, and we hope to have some representatives of the government and continue exactly what Mohsen is proposing. And that's what we are calling for the institutions, to have this kind of alliances and exactly saying that we want to receive 2 artists, 1 artist, and so on. It's from Afghanistan or from elsewhere. And have a kind of broader network that when there are crises like this, that they could react much faster. So that's the first topic to be discussed tomorrow. So join us, and we have actually the curatorial collective. It's Ruang Grupa from Jakarta with us. It's giving a keynote, which is a kind of very horizontal. It's like anti-hierarchical curatorial collective for the first time. It's curating Documenta 15. And then the closing session tomorrow is it's about the future scenarios and philosophies. And we have David Wengrow with us, who actually wrote the book with dear friend David Kreber, whose birthday is actually tomorrow. So David Kreber loved carnival, so we are going to celebrate his birthday tomorrow. He would have turned 61. I mean, also when there was his memorial, we actually organized carnivals all around the world. So it's going to be, it's also at the same time when we talk about the future scenarios and philosophies, it's kind of, we are going to look at the future with David Graeber and David Wengrow and many others. But
so thank you to all of you for holding up a candle tonight.
But tonight it's not over.
Well, we have a little bit more, of course, but we have to close the panel, and it's going on because today we're going to move on to the final artistic intervention of the evening, which is Andrei Kurecyk's documentary theater piece, right? And we're going to be hearing 3 cases from his, I think it's 3, is it? 2 or 3 cases from his play, documentary theater, Voices from Belarus. But thank you once again to all of the panelists. Marit, do you have some closing words?
I think it's a very good way. It's like Andrei's play is extremely, it's touching. And one of the voices we will hear is Maria Kalashnikova, who is a musician and who is sentenced for prison. It's for too many years. So we hope that you will kind of stay with us and watch the play.
And meet us in Gathertown, where you can see the entire series of artistic interventions at full length. So thanks again to all of you. Ahmed, Sarah, Mohsen, Barnabas, Andrei, good evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.